Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. So, this is about India and Pakistan and how they're not going to use nukes, how you can be absolutely sure about that. First of all, nobody in India or Pakistan has the slightest interest in attacking any other country. So it's rather absurd really in a way if you stop and think about it. Why would people in the United Kingdom and the United States be scared of what's going to happen in India and Pakistan? They're just attacking each other, they're not attacking us. And Pakistan's made it very clear that it's never going to use its nukes against any other country except India, and then it's not going to use its nukes against India in a situation like this, and then India is never going to use its nukes at all unless it's attacked with nukes. So that's the basic situation. Let's go through that a little bit more slowly. So first of all, they've had frequent military clashes. Every year there have been multiple clashes since this century, and in 1999, the last year of last century, they even had a small war between them, the Kargil War. And they both had nukes back then, which could have dropped from planes, and they didn't even consider it. So now, Pakistan, it's got its nukes, very unusually, because it doesn't want to spend a lot of money on a very big army. It could easily have 1 million or even 2 million in its army, but it's the cost, unusually, because it's got a very huge population and it's very poor. So it doesn't want to spend a lot of money on its military, and so it's got tactical nukes. And it will only use its nukes if it's attacked by an Indian army that is so large that its 500,000 strong army isn't big enough to stop it. So it's a cost-saving measure, and it has them only to target soldiers, never to target civilians. And then India knows this, so India is not going to attack Pakistan with an enormous army. And India has the clearest no first use policy of any country. Every year, India introduces 4 resolutions to UN General Assembly to try to get other nuclear powers to completely denuclearize as fast as possible. And they're always adopted by a majority in the General Assembly, which should assure you that most people do not want nukes. Most countries do not want anyone to have nukes. But the other nuclear powers haven't yet supported it, because they think that nukes keep them safe and keep the world safe. So India is a most implausible nation to ever use nukes. So, because it's, I should add ever there, well anyway I will. And as I said, Pakistan has its nukes only to deter India, no other country, not even Israel. If Israel was to attack Pakistan, Pakistan would not use nukes. And then China and Russia have also had a military clash. That was in 1964, and they were both nuclear powers already, and dozens died on both sides, and neither used nukes. And they don't use nukes for very obvious reasons. I mean, people are not mad. They're sensible. They leaders of countries make decisions for the sake of the members of their country and for themselves, and they do not use nukes because of a very obvious reason: it would be completely stupid. Nobody wants to go there, and so you are safe. And now what's happened this time is Pakistan has shot down an Indian fighter jet. Well, it says it's shot down 3 or 5, they're now saying 5. They might have. That's not unusual in really quite a small conflict, because in Ukraine, the soldiers are shooting down fighter jets all the time, and they shoot them down with small shoulder-mounted manpads. There are lots of videos of Ukrainian soldiers shooting down fighter jets. They're very vulnerable in a modern war. In this case, if it is true, if the story is true, what seems to have happened is that India used its modern French Rafales and in a dogfight at close quarters with Pakistan. That would be very stupid Indian pilots to do that. They should have stayed far away from any fighter jets and not be within visible contact of them. So if you get within visible contact of them, then the other side can look at you, they can see you, they fire a heat-seeking missile at you, and that is not going to be confused by the radar by its being almost invisible in radar. So it seems that that might have happened, and neither side is experienced in warfare, in modern warfare. Neither Pakistan nor India have fought any modern wars. So it's not surprising they make mistakes. In 2019, India accidentally shot down its own helicopter. The only military casualties in that conflict, when they fired some missiles at Pakistan. Pakistan shot down one of the Indian fighter jets, and then India shot down its own helicopter. And those are the only ones that died. 3 people died in the helicopter that India shot down, its own helicopter. This is the sign of a very inexperienced military. In a small combat, with just a few planes involved, to shoot down its own helicopter. And so it's not too surprising if Pakistan does shoot down some Indian fighter jet pilots, because neither side is very used to fighting in a high-tech war. And they just do these military clashes from time to time. So it's no surprise. And this does not mean that either side is going to use nukes. First of all, India is not going to use nukes because it's got no first-use policy. And remember, it's the Indian fighter jets that were shot down. It's not going to use nukes in response to its fighter jets being shot down. And Pakistan isn't going to use nukes because 3 fighter jets or 5 fighter jets do not constitute a massive army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers advancing from Pakistan. Indeed, Pakistan has shown very clearly that they can easily handle it by shooting them down. So the idea that Pakistan is going to use nukes makes no sense either. So it makes no sense at all. So now, what's going to happen next? Well, Pakistan, the defense minister has already said that they're ready to wrap it up. And the situation here is that India claims that 3 terrorists, 2 of them were Pakistani and they crossed over from Pakistan, and that in some way Pakistan is supporting them with terrorist camps, and claims that it's hit those terrorist camps. And Pakistan says that they don't know anything about these terrorists, and they ask India to provide details so that they can help find them. And they've offered India to support an international investigation to find out what happened, with international experts able to come to the scene and investigate. And India has not accepted that proposal. And Pakistan claims that India has just shot defenseless villages. India claims that they've destroyed terrorist camps. So that's the situation at the moment. There's no way to, in a situation like that, with competing claims, nobody on the ground, no international investigation, there's no way to know who's telling the truth there. But Pakistan has said that they are ready to step down as long as India stops attacking them. Then they won't do anything more. And that's how India's defense minister said that. So what is going to happen next? Well, it might be that India and Pakistan start talking to each other, and then talking internationally, maybe they get an international investigation of it all. That might happen. Or it might be that they start talking to each other and they just agree to stop fighting. Another thing that could happen is that they just don't attack back each other. They don't make any agreement either way. Just India doesn't attack again, and Pakistan just postpones and never responds. And that can happen. And another thing that could happen is that Pakistan waits maybe a week or something, a few days or a week, and then it does something back. And India waits a few days or a week, it replies again, and then that's the main way that countries like this de-escalate. And they just leave longer and longer in between, until eventually they're waiting months before they respond, and then it's over. So that's the usual way that something like this de-escalates, those 3 ways. So they make a mutual agreement to stop, there's some international intervention, or they just slow down until they're no longer attacking each other. So one of those 3 things is likely to happen. Now, this whole idea of the water agreement, well, right now the Himalayan glaciers, they're melting. They melt every spring, and masses of water goes flooding down the Indus River when that happens. Then, immediately after that, there's the monsoon season. And that continues all the way through to September. And it's totally impossible for India to stop the Indus in those conditions. It just hasn't got a reservoir big enough. Like, if you imagine trying to stop the Niagara Falls with a dam, and now you put that dam just a few feet in front of the Niagara Falls, and you build right up to the top of the Niagara Falls, that's not going to work, is it? Just will very quickly fill up and it will flow over. Now, if you've got maybe within an hour or two, it'll be full, depending how close it is to the falls. And if you've got a longer distance, if it's a mile or two, take a bit more to fill up, and then it'll flow over. And India doesn't even have a dam that's big enough and in order to a proper reservoir containing lots of water, you need a special situation, a plain leading to a gap between two hills, for instance, or a gorge. You stop it in the gorge and it backs up full for that plain. That would be a maximum size reservoir, although you usually also do it carefully to avoid flooding villages and things. This is a big project and would cost maybe $1 billion and it would take years to build. India's not going to do that. So there's no way that India even can stop it, the river, the water into Pakistan before October. And then if this is not this way, the other thing is that India can't legally leave the water sharing agreement. So it's said that it's left it, but it hasn't done anything legal. It's done nothing in paper because it can't leave it. So if both sides forget about it, the agreement stays in force, and then it will just continue as usual once we get to the end of the monsoon period. That's the most likely way that's going to be resolved. And then there's no way that either side uses nukes, but just this other idea that people have. They have this weird idea, very, very strange. It comes out of war games, I think. People playing with bits of paper on a table. And they have this idea that if you had one country was to use a nuke, so if there's another Hiroshima, that there's some kind of threshold that would be broken. And that immediately after that, all the countries that have nukes would start firing all their nukes at each other. This is comic book, this is nonsense. If there ever was another Hiroshima today, we have very advanced medicine today. We could save many of their lives. And if they knew how to deal with fallout, there'd be much less injuries anyway. And then anyone who are outside and who don't know that they should go inside as soon as the fallout falls out of the sky, and they have radiation sickness. And then if there's many also that had burns and so on, this is extremely difficult work, and the world's best specialists from around the world would be converging on it. It would take a global operation if there ever was a Hiroshima anywhere in the world again. The same thing again, and knowing what we know now, which they didn't know back then. Then you'd have the world's best doctors being the country they're calling for them, and doctors and nurses wanting to go and help them, and be the biggest humanitarian operation there's ever been in human history. So now imagine in that situation, are the two countries that are fighting each other going to drop more nukes on each other? Are other countries all going to start suddenly? No, of course not. The very opposite would happen. This is exactly the situation where countries that remember that the majority of the world wants to abolish nukes very quickly already. And this would swing the opinion of the public in the rest of the world, in the countries that already have nukes. And they would be saying to their leaders that they don't work, they're not stopping, they're not helping us, get rid of them. So that is what would happen in that situation. That would be the final abolition of nukes, which hopefully will happen anyway at some point in the not too distant future. So no, there's no way that there isn't a nuclear threshold in that sense. It just never makes sense to use them. So hopefully that helps you be a little bit less scared. So now let's look at these graphics. So this is about the Kargil War in 1999, And both, this is the got casualties there. Pakistan had 5,000 soldiers, 453 killed. India had 30,000 soldiers with 527 killed. And they both had nukes that they could drop on each other from planes. They didn't use them. And they didn't even consider using them. Same with the China War. Now this is about the water agreement, and so you can see there, those are the rivers that are, you can see those purple lines show the ones that are that under the agreement are controlled by Pakistan, and the red ones are controlled by India. And India is said that it's not going to, that it's withdrawn from this treaty. This means that in theory it could take more water from those, it could start controlling the Indus and not do what Pakistan wants them to do for those rivers. But it can't do that, at least until October. And it wouldn't be a simple operation to block to block the water to Pakistan. So it doesn't have the infrastructure in place to store or divert these flows at scale, especially between May and September, and even the rest of the year. And so I talked about that. I just talked about that in the introduction. So now this is about the fighter jet that Pakistan shot down, and the pilot escaped unharmed and was recaptured this back in 2019. So Pakistan and India both have nukes, but they do not escalate when this happens because I just explained about why they don't do it. This just gives you an idea about how incompetent India was back then. It missed all three of these targets. It used glide bombs such as Israel used it against Gaza Strip regularly, and that Ukraine and Russia used against each other. But this was the first time that India had ever used glide bombs in combat, and they all missed. Because you have to set not just the map coordinates, but also the elevation, the height. And the most likely thing happened is that all three glide bombs were set to, say, 33 meters above the intended target. They just flew over, and then once they'd gone over their target, and the onboard computer said, "Look, you haven't hit anything," then they fell in the forest beyond. So that's all that happened there. And that's the fighter jet again. I've got two copies of it for some reason. Oh, I've done that whole section twice. Now this is about nuclear winter. So it's not going to happen because there's not going to be an exchange of nukes. And this is the bizarre idea of India and China both exchanging 100 nukes which hit cities. Remember, Pakistan is only going to would only use its nukes to target military targets. It wouldn't use it against a civilian target. And you've got the very high levels of Indian cities that are especially flammable, but most cities, they're less flammable than a wildfire. And it's not for the it's about fire clouds. It's not about the mushroom clouds. So the mushroom clouds can't cause a nuclear winter, only the fire clouds. And the fire clouds will only start tens of minutes or more after the nuclear explosion, and they're not going to rise up into the stratosphere. The mushroom cloud does for a very big nuke, but not the fire clouds. You see the flat top of it? It only goes up to a certain height and goes above most of the weather, but then it'll start falling down, and not very much gets up into high enough so it'll stay up there. And we get those every year above wildfires. So it's always been very theoretical. I said Pakistan and Indian civilians would call on their governments to stop immediately. So why they would go and use 100 nukes doesn't make much sense, does it? And then even if you do this scenario and you set it up so both sides are hitting Indian cities which are far more flammable than European cities, and then you try and and then you use a model that has the worst possible assumptions. So you assume everything is far worse than reality rather than better than reality in terms of the amount of soot that goes out. And they even making all these assumptions and trying to make it as bad as possible, they managed to get, and you can look here, that's half a degree. And most of the well, there's no effect at all. Some patches go up to about half a degree, and then some patches go all the way up to a fall of 1 degree in the Arctic region, where it's already very cold, and where global warming has been much more than 1 degree C already. So it just goes back to pre-global warming and helps the ice to heal over a bit easier. Reverses a little bit of the Arctic ice melting in the Arctic, and that's all that would happen for a few years. That's not even a nuclear autumn. So now this is my summary. So I haven't got my glasses on, but India will use nukes as a last resort. No, Pakistan will use nukes as the last resort, and only if it's attacked by the Indian army, and no way that India attacks Pakistan with such a large conventional army. And India may send a military raid into Pakistan, so I said that before this happened. And India might use missiles against them, so I said that before this happened. This is nowhere near Pakistan's nuclear threshold. And so India will not be first to use nukes against Pakistan, so it's not going to use nukes against, because Pakistan shot down some of its fighter jets, and it submits those 4 nuclear disarmament resolutions every year. And then it's a list of the resolutions. So that's what that says there. And you can tell that governments, they're not seriously believe, so there's an awful lot of clickbait. There's also an awful lot of grandstanding by politicians, and there's an awful lot of people bluffing. But they're not serious ever. Never in the entire Ukraine war has any of them showed any signs of being at all serious about believing what they say. Because if you can tell that, because if they seriously believed it, then they would tell us how to protect ourselves against fallout. So Hiroshima, tens of thousands of civilians in Hiroshima died after the explosion, and they died of the fallout. And most of those lives could have been saved with very simple instructions. They just say, if there's a nuclear explosion, then look out for dust falling from the sky. And that would happen within tens of minutes, easy to spot. Just heavy dust falling, or black rain, as they actually got if it's raining, as they had with Hiroshima. When that happens, get indoors. And oh no, the black rain was later. That was after the firestorm. Sorry. So when you get dust falling from the sky, then get indoors quickly. Indeed, if you see a mushroom cloud, immediately get indoors and get as far away from the dust as you can. And that simple instruction would save millions of lives. And you could easily present that in a 1-minute video, and it would be on TV every day. Just like the simple instructions for COVID. And every day we would be told, if you see falling dust from the sky, if you see a mushroom cloud, or you get evidence there's been a nuclear explosion and then there's dust falling from the sky, anything like that, get indoors. And they would just tell you that every day. And we'd all know what to do. I don't think even 1 in 100 of younger people know what to do. And they'd just be out there doing selfies with the mushroom cloud in the background and playing around with the dust and wondering what it is. So we don't know this because we don't need to know it, because there's no risk of a nuclear war. And then people argue back to me when I try to point this out to them, and they say, well, but they're hiding this information from us because they think that if they tell us how to protect ourselves from nuclear fallout, that we'll get scared. That makes no sense. Why would they be bluffing about nukes if they don't want to scare us? If they're hypersensitive to people getting scared? That makes no sense at all. So, no, they're not hiding this from us in any way. It's not hidden information. It's easy to find, but they're just not sharing it because there's no need to know. And some people, if you ask your average person, how do you protect yourself from fallout, they will say, take iodine tablets. It's the most common answer I get. And that would do absolutely nothing. Totally pointless. those are useful if you have eaten food and drunk water that's been contaminated after a nuclear power plant accident. It's of utterly no use for nuclear fallout. We do absolutely nothing. There's a small amount of radioactive iodine in it, and it's not enough to be terribly relevant given all the other radioactive things that are in it, and you aren't eating it, so just get out of it, get away from it. No need to eat iodine tablets. It does absolutely nothing. So no, those instructions to use iodine tablets are nothing to do with nuclear fallout. And so I go in here, but while we don't risk a world war from Ukraine, the Middle East, China, North Korea, or anywhere else in the world. So hopefully that helps. Then another thing that comes up, just a little addition at the end. So many people have this idea that if there's a nuclear explosion anywhere in the world, make the whole world radioactive. I think it's from movies or something. Another one of these urban myths. And in reality, the fallout only travels as far as the wind can blow it. And the fallout is actually the mushroom cloud itself, which has got quite a lot of heavy dust in it. And all the heavy dust falls up to the ground, because that's why it's called fallout. And it falls to the ground in tens of minutes. And then within an hour, the mushroom cloud is dispersed, and there's nothing left of it. There's a little bit of fine dust left in our atmosphere, it blows all over the earth too, but that just eventually it'll fall out very slowly and percolate to the ground, but just a tiny addition to the background radiation we have all the time. And actually, my body, your body, everyone's body is slightly radioactive. You need to eat potassium to be healthy, and potassium is slightly radioactive. It's got an isotope in it mixed in with all the potassium in the world that's slightly radioactive. So all of you're actually emanating gamma rays at the moment, very low dose of gamma rays, but you can measure it with a very sensitive machine. And so a little bit of radioactive dust with little bits of stuff from a nuclear explosion on the other side of the world is not going to harm you. And we have a little bit of radioactivity everywhere from the explosions when I was young. So when I was a kid, there was a nuclear explosion going off in the world approximately every week, a nuclear test. And those were atmospheric tests back then, before they went underground. And the radioactivity from those just doesn't travel very far at all. And depending how close it is to the ground, sometimes there's almost no radioactivity. So I mean, for instance, you get people saying that if there is a nuclear explosion in India, that the fallout could reach Mexico. There's no wind that is strong enough that could carry the fallout from India to Mexico in a few tens of minutes, which is all the time there is before it's all gone. And then the dust, once it falls to the ground, it just remains radioactive for a very short period of time. It's got very short-lived isotopes. The rule of thumb is that if you have 7 times the amount of time, it's reduced tenfold in radioactivity. So by 2 days, it's far less than it was when it first fell. By the time a fortnight, it's much less again, and then 10 times that again, and it's very much less again. And within 2 days, emergency workers will be able to get in and help people almost everywhere. And then within a couple of weeks, people can return to their homes within the fallout plumes, and except for really worst hotspots. So that's the sort of speed, how quickly it becomes less radioactive. And within a year or two, the whole thing is back to normal. And there's only some testing needed for cows that are eating grass to see if we manage to eat enough grass that's been affected to affect their meat. So most people don't know that. So anyway, yeah, that's it. I've explained everything. So it's not going to happen. You're not going to have a nuclear war in Pakistan, and there's nobody else anywhere else in the world has got any concern about this at all, because they're not attacking us. They're just attacking each other, and only with very small military clashes which they've been going on for all this century, except in 2022. Every other year there have been military clashes, and this time, because they've got more modern weapons, then Pakistan, not surprisingly, has shot down a few of the Indian fighter jets. And India has a no first use policy for nukes, and India is not going to respond by sending in an army into Pakistan that is so large that it can overwhelm 500,000 Pakistani soldiers. So Pakistan is not going to use nukes either. And India is not going to do that, both because it would be totally out of proportion when all they're after is because of 3 terrorists, and they're never going to do that, not going to do that ever, because they know very well that Pakistan has its tactical nukes, and that's why they have them, and that's why India is never going to send such a large army into Pakistan. That's the whole point in it. So anyway, hopefully this helps you to be a bit less scared about all this. Any questions, do say, and I'll put a link to this in the video comments.